I think there is a unique mobilization opportunity around the anger that's bubbling up around what's happening with Trump and his policies. But I think there's opportunity for a different kind of movement if we can also give them something to vote for.
Welcome to the Practivist Pod, the practice of activism made practical.
This week, we've got an imminent budget resolution vote, a vote on the so-called SAVE Act, and, oh yeah, global markets tumbling because of the stupidest tariffs in our history.
And then we're joined by one of the sharpest minds in democratic strategy, pollster, author, and truth teller, Cornell Belcher. We'll dig into what the data's telling us and how Democrats can win in the midterms, need to. I'm Jessica Craven.
I'm Steve Pearson.
Hold on. Stay strong. It won't be long. Yeah, yeah. We will build a better world.
What a turbulent, I guess, would be the word, week. But also, for me, really hopeful. And this is I don't mean to jump on my reason for hope because we'll talk about it more later. But this weekend's protests on Saturday were really uplifting and what we need to see more of. So crazy week.
Yeah, they were, and they feel like 1,000 years ago. It's the funniest thing. Like, I feel like they were so amazing, and already it's Wednesday, and I'm like, I'm exhausted again. I need another protest on Saturday to lift me back up. But yeah, they were amazing. And then the week has been exhausting. There's no lie, it has been.
Yeah. Well, you'll get it because we're going to keep doing these protests, and we have Tesla takedowns every weekend. We've got hands off our Social Security protest coming up. Gosh, I should have that in front of me, but I believe it's on the 15th. Can you confirm?
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And then the 19th, we have another hands off protest, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, again, I'm jumping, but that's okay. What is been inspiring to me about the hands off is, first of all, it's meeting people where they are. It's not just these massive, we certainly saw that. We saw these massive marches and protests in major cities all over the place. But it's also been in smaller towns and smaller venues. Even around Los Angeles, I went to one in Studio City, close to where I live, with about 300 people, standing on a street corner. And that's really meeting people where they are and making our voices heard and building that kind of resilience and continuity that is so important. So, that's really sustainable. It's hard to get people to show up, by the thousands, downtown, on a consistent basis, but you can get people to come out and make their voices heard in their communities. So.
Yeah, and I've been very torn about this because I've sort of felt like on one level, like we need the big numbers, but then on another level, clearly, like more people will show up if it's in their hometown. And there's something very like Tesla takedown about it, of just these little pop-up demonstrations everywhere that are actually more visible. And also what we saw was people turning out in really, really red towns. My friend Michelle Hornish writes about this great in her newsletter, Small Deeds Done. She's like, this is a very notable thing for these people to be turning out in these very red towns. That it is an act of courage in and of itself. And the fact that really so many did in towns that are tiny and where everyone knows everyone, it's a very big deal. And I do think that this is a good strategy for us and we need to embrace it. And what I'm trying to do is think of these protests the same way I think of Tesla takedowns, which is just like, this is a thing I will be doing over and over again. I will be going to the same spot and showing up over and over. And it's not one big event. It is ongoing, consistently building events. And so that's just what we need to do.
Yeah, and if you weren't able to make it last weekend, and if you haven't been able to do it, it's really great to be in community with each other, and it's really fun and uplifting to be together. And what I found, especially in the Studio City one, was I ran into a lot of neighbors who I didn't know from this work that I do and that
Yeah.
you and I do together. We're part of this, Los Angeles, Southern California activist community. And so we see each other at all these things all the time. But to be in my community and see a bunch of people that I knew from different walks of life, that was really, really cool. And to
Yeah.
your point, like the big ones are really important because they get more media attention, and the hard part is always getting that earned media, getting the media to report it. And notably, the LA Times didn't really report much of it. Gosh, I wonder why. And you've got
The media,
folks
let me
like-
just interrupt you to say the media
Yeah.
blew it. They blew it. I can't believe the level at which they blew it. Like, it just needs
I
to be
believe
said.
it.
Yeah, I
it's,
guess so.
It's deep. It's really disappointing. But this has been our challenge from the beginning. The way media covers this, it's hard to get them to come out to stuff that we do. So getting that earned media is always challenging. And then when we do, and I know I've talked about this probably a couple times on the show already, but I remember one specific impeachment action back in 2019, I guess it was, or 20.
Yeah.
And we had thousands of people in downtown LA at this rally, and there was one counter protester with a bullhorn, and that's what all the cameras were trained on, right?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what the media
Yeah.
was covering. So
Yeah.
it's always a challenge, but the more consistent we are about it, and the more that we're out there, so
Yeah.
they can't ignore it, then that's what will really break through.
Yeah. And it's getting out on social media. I mean, the good news is it was everywhere on social media, but really, like, it was I don't remember if it wasn't the AP, it was Reuters or some news, big legacy media that said scores of people showed up. Scores of people. I was like, scores, literally. Maybe it was CNN. It was wild. So yeah. And then lots of other just like thousands of people. And, the count has been very nebulous. I'm a little skeptical of the 5 million count that we keep hearing. And I'd love to see something that was really confirmed, but clearly millions of people, right? Like if it was 1 million, 2 million, 3, whatever, but like millions of people turned out, and no one in mainstream media will say that. It's like they want democracy to fall. I don't know why, because there's no free press in a democracy, but I don't know. It's baffling. It really is.
Well, we will keep at it, and
Yes.
you name-checked AP, so just want to throw a little kudos to AP for standing by the, courage of their principles. And just this week, a judge ordered that they needed to be reinstated to the press pool. Thank you for keeping the Gulf of Mexico, AP.
Yeah. I love that. I love the AP. Yeah, I do. Sorry.
Yeah, great source, always. And so let's talk about what is happening this week in Congress, because there is a lot of important stuff. I'd like to start with the SAVE Act. As listeners are hearing this, the SAVE Act is coming to the floor on Thursday. So if you're waking up and hearing this, you need to be making calls to your Congress member all day long. Bullet points for me about the SAVE Act is that it is such a restrictive law that creates only a birth certificate or a passport as a form of ID that's acceptable in order to register to vote, meaning that it will immediately disenfranchise 69 million women in our country whose name does not match the name on their birth certificate.
Yeah.
So this is an attack on women, full stop. This is an attack on our voting rights, on all of our voting rights, and on free and fair elections to begin with, and it needs to be stopped.
Yeah. And 21 million people in the country don't have access to a birth certificate or passport, but are citizens. Young people, a lot of people don't have a passport, don't know where their birth certificate is. It's just so
only about half of the
fucking
population
stupid.
has a passport. Yeah.
Yeah, right. When they're expensive to get, and all kinds of obstacles to that. And also, it is the idea that undocumented people are voting in our elections. We've talked about this before. It's been thoroughly debunked. There's no evidence of it. Even the Heritage Foundation could not find evidence for it. It doesn't happen. It is not a thing. So we are attempting to fix a non-problem. And plus, states have tried implementing a law like this on a state level. There are 2 states who have done it. I want to say Arizona is one of them, but don't quote me on that because I may be wrong. Of course, I'm on a public podcast, so I am being quoted. But in both cases, it was a disaster, and the laws had to be repealed. Like, it just couldn't work. And I believe they were blocked by courts in both cases. It's so bad. It's so stupid. Anyway, but let's talk about the vote, because the vote is coming up. I want to warn people in advance. It is very likely, if not certain, that it is going to pass in the House. It just is. Republicans have a majority. Unfortunately, people, did not vote enough in November of 2024. So Republicans are united behind this bill. And as if that is not bad enough, we know of at least one Democratic lawmaker who, as of this recording, is saying he's going to vote yes. And guess who it is? Who is it? It is Maine's Jared Golden. Jared Golden, Democrat in name only. And if he's your representative, call him. It's actually really important that Democrats not support this bill, even if it's ordained to pass. It is one thing to say, oh, this passed with all Republican votes, and it's another thing to say, oh, well, this passed with bipartisan votes. And what Jared Golden is giving them is a bipartisan passage, which is bad. And also it's just wrong and stupid. And even Republican women especially hate this bill because it is going to disenfranchise so many of them who have taken their husband's names. So Jared Golden, just do better. Do better.
I can't wrap my head around why it makes sense for him to do that. I don't think that it's obviously ethically and substantively it's terrible. It's a terrible vote. But tactically, I mean, that's the only reason why he thinks he's in a conservative area. He's on the bubble there. It's definitely a swing district. He wants to win back his seat. We want him to win back his seat. We need those Democratic seats. I don't think this helps him. I think this disenfranchises him with more voters. It will literally disenfranchise him with more voters because the women who are leading the resistance will not be able to fucking vote for him. So, I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I want to be clear. I don't think that the SAVE Act would remove people's voter registration. Like, it's when you move, when you go to a new state, when you go to a new county, when you have to update your voter registration, that is when the problem begins. But I'm not saying that makes it okay. It doesn't. But even so, it is a clearly unpopular bill. Every time I post anything about it, it goes completely viral. Women in this country, Republican and Democrat, are so freaked out by it and so angry about it. It is just stupid. This is a man, however, who also voted for the Laken Riley Act. It took forever to get him to even co-sponsor any kind of common sense gun safety bills until there was a mass shooting in his district, at which point he said, oh, well, I've really rethought that, he's just not the brightest bulb. I'm sorry, if anyone who likes him is listening, but he's just not. Like, he may be very bright in certain respects, but this is not. What we're seeing from him right now is not political courage, and it's not even political acumen. It's just dumb. Lecture over.
Thank you. I hope he hears it. And again, like my focus obviously is on winning back the House in 24. And so
2026.
Thank you.
2025.
That's what I meant.
Would have been nice if we'd won it in 2024.
I said that last week on the show. Had to jump in and fix that. But terrible with dates. Good with this, mission though. And so I will almost bend over backwards to give someone grace if there's a good tactical reason to hold on to a seat in a very conservative area. But I don't see why this is it. I don't see why this is the vote that he needs to take. So
no, it's not.
So anyway, moving on from Jared, should we talk about these tariffs? This use of tariffs is just the dumbest, most destructive, self-destructive move that we've seen in the history of our country.
Right.
But you have some context about how we talk about tariffs that I think is really interesting and helpful.
Well, yeah, there's some nuance. But I think that we tend to think that it's either like all tariffs or no tariffs. Like, if you're on the left, you have to say no tariffs. And if you're on the right, you want all tariffs. And from I've talked to a bunch of people who sort of work in the trade, like the progressive trade space, and one of the things they really always repeat is like, please don't bash tariffs. Tariffs are fine. They're great. Joe Biden used tariffs. Many presidents, probably every president, has used targeted tariffs. So the problem is not that Trump wants to use tariffs. And it's not even that he's, very concerned about the trade deficit, because it is a concern. Like the fact that we don't make anything in our country is arguably a really big problem. We learned that during COVID, right? When we couldn't get PPE here because we don't make anything here. So there are a lot of people on the Republican side, but also a lot of those working class workers, perhaps, that we lost in the last election, who really like tariffs, and they want someone to do something about the trade imbalance. So when we bash it completely, we're missing the nuance, right? What it is important to understand is that even though tariffs can be great when used in a targeted way, what Trump is doing is an absolute misuse of and abuse of the tariff power. And what he's doing is not targeted tariffs. He's doing across the board tariffs, which is not the way you're supposed to do it. He's using a formula that even the person who supposedly created the formula says they're using it wrong. They've gone four times higher than his formula recommends. And then they're doing it to friends and foes. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do this kind of punitive thing to allies. And they're doing it so quickly so if the idea is like, well, this is going to bring jobs back to our country. Okay, so are we building factories here? Because right now Trump is trying to overturn all of the policies that Biden passed to build factories, right? He's freezing the Inflation Reduction Act funding. He wants to overturn the Chips and Science Act. So just last week, he and Doge defunded an organization here in the States that is literally focused on bringing back domestic manufacturing. They defunded it. So where is he bringing back the manufacturing? Because otherwise what he's doing is he's just killing us with tariffs, and there's no plan on the other side. Not to mention, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, I read this great Substack called Big by Matt Stoller, and he's a genius, very good on monopolies and antitrust and trade. And what he was writing is, when you are going to try to bring manufacturing back, you need an infrastructure in the country that supports manufacturing. You need a government that does things like protect labor and have health care and education. And Trump and Musk are in the middle of literally dismantling our government. Anybody who thinks that we are going to bring trade back to this country 100% or even 50% when our government is simultaneously being dismantled does not understand the way manufacturing works. And so that is why, that's the beginning of why these policies are so unbelievably stupid. So if people come back at you with like, yeah, but China owns us, you can say, yeah, it's a problem. This is not the way to solve it. And I really recommend reading Matt Stoller on this. He's great and much more, coherent maybe than I am, but
I thought
great.
That was very coherent.
Oh, thank you.
And but I will read Matt Stoller as well in all of my free time.
All of your spare time. Yeah.
All of our spare time. But the other thing that I just want to add to that too is, for businesses to develop in any country, including the U.S., corporations, if they're looking to, invest in a country and build out manufacturing plants or whatever they need to build out there, they want stability.
Right. Yes.
They're, first of all, it takes years and years. If you're going to build a big manufacturing hub, that doesn't happen overnight. It takes years to get that done.
Yeah.
And so they're not just looking at, okay, what's the trade policies right now? They're looking at, where is the trade policy going to be in 5 years? Where is the trade policy going to be in 10 years? They want consistency. And God, that is not what we have right now. We do not have an environment where investment in our country would look good to any reasonable corporation, because they just don't, it's been so incredibly volatile. So, and they don't know who's going to be in the crosshairs next, and if it's going to be them too, So that's an important bit of context for this too. Is we think long term, and everything Trump is doing right now is just this knee jerk, wannabe tough guy trade war, which is, happily dividing his administration, creating, some dissent amongst the oligarchs who fund him and have been supporting him, and so we're seeing that happen. So hope we look for the good to come out of our global economy crashing, and I hope we can find a way to weather the storm, but it's going to have a lasting impact.
It's going to have I don't think people understand what this will do to us in the long term. Like, if we are ever able to regain people's trust, other countries, it's going to take, we're looking at a decade. I mean,
That's right.
it is, yeah, the destruction he's doing to our country right now is so long term. Yeah, it's hard to fathom.
Because they're not going to trust us, even when we flip the House
Yeah,
in
sure.
26 and win back the presidency in 28. These other countries are going to be like, well, what's going to happen in 4 years? Are you going to
Absolutely.
elect Don Jr.?
Yeah,
What are you going to
right,
do?
right.
So it's damaging, and we enjoy watching these corporations take a big hit, because we know that they are going to push back against Trump, and we need that. But the real damage that's going to be done is on working people, as always, marginalized people who are losing maybe what little savings they have. So. It's pretty devastating.
And small businesses, I will just say also, my sisters have a small business, and they purchase from a lot of people overseas. And these things are so, and I've heard from so many small business owners, there's no room for this. Like, they're hanging on by a thread as it is. And this will hit so fast. That's the other thing. There's no plan for small business owners. Like, let us help you get through the next couple of years while we do this. Nothing. It's upsetting.
I'll say one positive thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor this because, whatever. It's a podcast. We can talk for as long as we damn want. But
Belabor. Yeah.
I got an email from a clothing company.
Yeah.
Forget which one it was. I think it's Marine Layer, actually. I believe that's the shirt that I'm wearing. Anyway.
Very nice.
Thank
Product
you.
placement right there.
They don't sponsor the show, everybody. So, I mean, they
Yet.
could if they want to.
Yeah.
Marine Layer, if you're listening. But we would love to wear your clothes on our show. But they sent out an email about a sale they were having because of Trump's tariffs. And they're like, before that Trump's tariffs go into effect, enjoy our sale right now. And I thought that was really amazing. Because in red they were calling this Trump's tariffs and saying how this was bad and going to make everything more expensive.
Yeah.
And Cornell Belcher and I talk about this a lot in our interview that, and we've said this a lot too, Democrats don't necessarily have a messaging problem. They have a message delivery problem.
Right.
And so to have like this email from a clothing company going out to people who aren't necessarily paying attention to politics, but saying Trump's tariffs are making our clothes more expensive for you. That's pretty interesting and powerful, and I hope that continues to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you're out there listening to this and you have a business, many people have suggested adding the Trump's tariffs to the price tag, or at the very least saying, because of Trump's tariffs, everything is about to get a lot more expensive. Please don't blame us, and shop now while you still can. For sure. Absolutely.
So real quick, before we get to our reasons for hope, you wanted to talk about the reconciliation bill, rather.
Yeah, well, and we will be quick because we've gone on a lot on tariffs, but I just want to tell people to keep an eye out for the way that this is going to unfold, assuming that the Republicans in the House pass their budget resolution this week, which agrees with the Senate version. They're going to start hammering out the language of this bill, and this is when we're going to really get to see the exact cuts to Medicaid and SNAP and higher education assistance and all the different things. I also want you to keep your eyes out, and we'll talk more about this next week, for something called the current policy baseline, which is this little gimmick that they are using to basically pretend that this new extension of Trump's tax cuts, they want to make them permanent and add another $1.5 trillion worth of tax cuts for rich people, that none of this is going to add any money to the deficit, because Trump's tax cuts have already been in effect for 8 years, and therefore going forward, they're basically free. This is literally the math they are trying to persuade us that they're using. The parliamentarian would never go for it, so they're not letting the parliamentarian weigh in on it. It is just a really jaw-droppingly sort of brazen attempt to gaslight Americans, and even them, like, they know it's bullshit, but it's the only way they can get the tax cuts through that they want to get through. So I just want to put that on your radar. And also, when you hear people justifying the tariffs by talking about our giant deficit, which I heard Trump doing just yesterday, please remember, if we have such a giant deficit, why the fuck are Republicans about to give out $4.5 trillion worth of new tax cuts to the richest people in the country? Just why? Ask them that when they talk to you about our giant deficits. It's just illogical and insane. But we'll talk more about it next week, because this will be going on for a few more weeks.
We'll talk about it more next week. I'll just say, you said it, the only way that they can pay for those tax cuts are by cutting Social Security, healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare.
Yep.
That's the only way they can do it. So
and the tariffs.
anytime a
The
Republic-
tariffs are us paying for those tax cuts. The tariffs are literally those rich people tax cuts being foisted on us to pay for them. It's fucking outrageous. Excuse my language. Sorry.
My God, lady. All right.
I know.
Well, let's then pivot from outrage to hope to our reasons for hope. And I talked about it at the top of the show. For me, my reasons for hope were this weekend's protests and how they really gave a lot of different people the on-ramp to do this. And so I think we're going to see people continue to stand up, continue to get out in the street, and that's what we really, really need. And so that's given me a lot of hope. What about you? What's your reason for hope, Jess?
Yeah, well, there were a bunch of different things, but I was really happy to see, finally, Senator Richard Blumenthal announcing that he's going to place a hold on all Trump nominees going forward. This is not going to stop them, but it will force the Senate to vote on them one person at a time, and it will slow them down dramatically. Brian Schatz is also placing holds. This is another Democratic senator from Hawaii, placing holds on over 50 Trump nominees. And he has placed holds also on all nominations at the State Department. So this should have been done from day one. Like, you can get real mad at the Democrats for, like, why are you only doing this now? But we also want to celebrate the fact that they are at least doing it. So if either of these are your senators, please call them and thank them, because this is the kind of fighting we need, and we need it now. We needed it yesterday, but we're getting it now. So let's be grateful for small favors and just thank them. We need lots more like this. So I am grateful for it.
I am too, and I just say let's fucking go. I have to say, I'm not big on looking in the past. Like, we are where we are. We need to move forward. So it doesn't help to be like, yeah, this is great, but we should have done it a long time ago.
Not helpful.
That may be true, but it doesn't fucking matter. Here we are. We're together. We're out in the streets. Our senators are standing up, and we need to continue this fight and encourage them to do it. So
yeah, totally.
So having said that, I'm really excited. One of my favorite strategists, I kind of shit on pollsters and consultants from time to time, but Cornell Belcher is not one of them, because he is always great, and I have a lot of esteem for him. So here comes my interview with Cornell Belcher.
Woo!
Cornel Belcher is the founder and president of Brilliant Corners Research and Strategies, where he has advised everyone from the DNC to major advocacy organizations and presidential campaigns. He's also the author of A Black Man in the White House, a powerful look at race and politics in the Obama era, I should say. Cornel, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, right before we recorded, we were kind of joking around about the caveat when you have any pleasantries. But how are you holding up right now? What are you doing to keep yourself sane?
Oh, well, I haven't been sane for a long time because I work in politics.
I mean, not that you need to stay sane.
So I haven't been sane in a long time, but I'm doing a lot of drinking, and
that's healthy.
now, but getting focused is, I think after the election, uh, a lot of progressives and quite frankly, a lot of just moderates were so numb and a lot of
Hmm.
disillusionment and and people saying they're going to take a break. And one of the memes that I saw on social media a lot was, especially from African American women, is like, we're going to
Hmm.
step back and take a break and all this sort of thing. But there's a lot of sort of numbness and disillusionment and sort of pull back. And I talked to people in the business, but also just family, friends, and they were like sort of tuning out
Yeah.
because of just being in shock and disbelief, uh, and and questioning sort of, America, is this you,
Yeah.
right? Um, and and a lot of soul searching about, well, is this really America where we elected a guy who's done all this? Really, is this us?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that, and I think some of us are pushing through the fog and dismay of some of that, and begin to focus in again on the task at hand, because
Right.
we have to focus on the task at hand, right? And we are
Right.
launched back into a place where, just talking to someone yesterday evening, and she brought up, well, it's unreal that we are rounding up people and sending them off to other foreign countries without due process,
It's
right?
terrifying.
And
Yeah.
it's like, it's not, it's like, is this a reality show? But we got to get focused, and we are the ones who have to engage it. And if we don't engage it, well, then they win. So I'm I,
Absolutely.
I'm getting focused.
Yeah, good. Well, that's exactly what I want to talk to you about today. And I'm a fan. We've had the opportunity to. I think this is our third conversation that we've had, and the last time you and I spoke was September 2022, right before the last midterm elections. And we talked about the importance of understanding and speaking to the rising American electorate and the fact that we will soon be a majority minority country. And in 2022, at those midterms, we beat back that supposed red wave midterm. But of
Yep.
course, we lost last year and saw a pretty significant conservative voter shift. And of course, in my mind, the real story is about how many Democrats didn't vote at all and didn't show up. But I'm hearing from a number of strategists that feel Democrats need to distance themselves from messaging and issues that Republicans have used to exploit and divide us and focus on kitchen table economic issues. Um, Obviously, right now, given the state of the economy, a Democrat running on the economy seems like a pretty good idea. But where there is, as you just talked about with immigration, I mean, there's such an overt and outright attack on DEI and an attempted erasure of our very history. How can we not fight back against that with everything that we've got? So,
Yeah.
what I really want to dig in with you about today is of course how we win back the House in the midterms, because that's our task. As long as we still have elections, we need to do that. But also how we build a future where we actually do reckon with racism's impact on our country. I mean, I know that's a lot, but what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that? How do we fix all that moving forward? And
Easy
go.
peasy, easy. That's how. Well, let's step back and set the context, because there.
Yeah.
Um, I'm struck by the conversation about losing or winning voters, and there's a swing to conservatism, as if though, you know, and elections are won and lost by uh, tens and twenties of millions of Americans who go, um, I was wrong about voting
Right.
for that party and that candidate last time, so I'm going to switch and vote for this party and this candidate this time, right? Um, there's a fallacy that, are there swing voters? Absolutely, there are swing voters. but there's this ideal that elections are primarily won or lost by voters moving by the same set of voters moving back and forth between the parties. And and there are some voters moving back and forth between the parties, but elections are won and lost or determined primarily by, quite frankly, who turns out.
Right.
And you show, and I think that is, but it's, and I really want to talk about that because I think that's lost in the conversation. So and look, I worked for Obama in '08 and 12, and and so we had a historic election in 2008 where we changed the face of the electorate from what the electorate has typically looked like. And if we hadn't expanded that electorate and made that electorate younger and more diverse, Barack Obama would not have been president, like the president in 2008. So we had this historic election in 2008. And then you know what happens in 2010? Democrats get completely smoked, as you know, right?
Hmm.
And but then again in 2012, Obama wins another majority. So what's happening? Are the voters just changing their minds? No, there's different electorates. If you look at, um, you know, 2008, where you had at that time pretty high a turnout at 62% turnout, and so you had a more robust, more diverse, more, younger electorate. But in 2010, when Democrats got absolutely crushed, what you see is 41% turnout in that electorate.
Right.
And then if you go to 2014, where Democrats again got their hats handed to them, you had 37% turnout. So you had a different electorate than you had when 2008 and 2012, when Barack Obama um, was winning. And then if you go to 2020, right, you had a historic turnout. You had a really different electorate than, quite frankly, you had in 2024, right? So you're looking at an electorate where you know, rough estimates, at least 6 million Biden voters pulled back from that electorate. And what,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like Trump increased his performance by 6 million votes, because he didn't, right? He increased his performance by what, maybe 1 million or so votes, right off the top of my head. So um, it is dictated by the electorate, and even in this sort of this ideal of the swing. All right, so if we just, there is some swing, but it's typically negligible. Look, if you look at just from the data that's out there from 2024, roughly 5% of Biden's 2020 voters who actually showed up to vote voted this time moved to Trump. But 4% of Trump's voters from the last time moved to Harris. So the swing is negligible. The problem
Hmm.
is you had in 2024, and this is remarkable, and this is kudos to Republicans, because it certainly wasn't probable. But you had an electorate in 2024 that was older, whiter, more non-college educated than it had been in a long, long time. If you just look at race,
Yeah.
and again, to point about how the demographics are changing in this country, America's growing browner, not whiter. So the electorate in 2020 was 67% white. And as you know, so for our folks who are listening in, because of the changing shifts in demographics in this country, the American electorate probably should be about 2 points browner, every presidential election. On a conservative side, 2 points browner. So if it was
Okay.
67% white in 2020, you would think that it would be roughly 65%, maybe 66% white in 2024. But it wasn't. It was 71% white. It was whiter than it's been in a long, long time, right? And that was them. You saw um, Republicans surging their vote, and
Yeah.
you particularly look at what they got out of rural America. They got more, and go to Georgia, for example, which I think is, for me, is a state that is central battleground America right now.
Yeah, I was
They
thinking
got
about that too.
more they got more votes out of the rural areas in 2024 than they did in 2020. And 2020 was a historic high point turnout election. So for all my friends who say, we just gotta, because I hear this every every campaign season, where as long as I've been alive, where Democrats don't do well. If we just had a better economic message,
Right.
right? Um,
I
but
knew
instead
that
of
would be
listening to
vaguely
working people,
triggering for you when I brought it up, but I,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, it's because if we just rearrange some words about the economy on the board, it'll solve our lot of problems. When I would argue, Steve, that we have, right, and full transparency, right. I'm a dean guy, right? I worked for Howard Dean. I was a part of the 50 state strategy, so you know, um, frame of reference here. But we have more of a tactical problem than I think a messaging problem. I do, right? I don't care what our
hmm
message was. If you look at how so much of research, post-election research, and even post-election research that we've done shows that Republicans are just reaching more voters and even some of our voters in the social media spaces and the streaming
yeah,
spaces in a way that we're just not doing. Like they are dominating those spaces. And so when I sit with um some, I get called out for one of the PAC clients uh like a month out from the election and go out, well, our African American numbers with voters in Nevada and Arizona aren't looking right. Not huge population, but they're not looking as robust as they should. And I go out there and do focus groups with some who are sitting on the fence. And it's not about them going Trump, but them sitting on the fence. And you talk to them, and they literally can't have a conversation about anything Harris or Biden have done, anything Harris is even talking about. And now what's really interesting, Stephen, I did this,
because that hasn't reached them
because it's just
just
not reaching them. And
yeah,
I did this a week after, I think, she had literally rolled out her African American male economics sort of agenda and plan, and asked if any
yeah,
of them have heard about it. And silence, absolute
interesting.
silence. However, they could tell you that Harris locked up a lot of black men, which of course was a Republican trope that they've been pushing. But but so what I say to my friends is, sure, let's come up with a better economic message. But it doesn't mean
Yeah.
a goddamn thing if we're not reaching them.
I've been saying, yeah, I mean, I talk about that a lot. I don't think Democrats have a messaging problem. They have a message delivery problem, and that's been the
Yes.
case for a long time.
Yes. And that's got and but that's not fixed by a bunch of rich consultants sitting around a room rearranging words on a board to come up with a better tagline. It's not. That's
Yeah.
getting back to grassroots communications, all 50 states, doing the hard work of party building and influence building, right? It's not going to be changed by, and I'm a consultant in Washington D.C. That could be changed by the consultant class in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
coming up with more words to talk about the economy. Now, the other part about this is this idea of
Just so you
moving
know,
work.
not to interrupt, but just so you know, there's many times when I have bashed pollsters and consultants, and I often throw in there, except for Cornell Belcher. He's one of the good ones, so you can't paint with the broad brush. But anyway,
No, I
sorry
appreciate
to
I
interrupt.
appreciate that because I bashed them out. But some of this Washington thing, and one of the things we've got to sort of move the central sort of thinking and organization out of Washington back across the states, I think is really important in that. But to this thing that has me really frustrated is conventional, and this is where I get in trouble. So so Trump Trump is between 2020 and 2024. Trump wins, between 67-66% of non-college white voters. Um, Harris, I think, won between 32 and 35% of white non-college white voters on her losing. It's the same as Biden when he won, right? A majority, right? It's not like that number's been moving. As if you know
Yeah.
this, like
Yeah.
Democrats haven't won non-college white voters
Right.
in 30, 40 years. What are we
Yeah.
talking about here?
I guess that's the interesting thing that I'm hearing so much about is that's the it's like we have this changing demographic. We have this clear path to me, which is not only for like the right thing to do and the social good and to be inclusive, but also tactically how we're building for the future and building our party. It needs to be looking at our multiracial coalition and what the electorate, looking forward. But now all of a sudden I'm hearing all these people trying to deal with the same problem that we've had, like you said, for decades, and that's that we, lose non-college educated white male voters. It just doesn't seem like a good use of time to try to adjust our tactics so that we're fixing that problem when we know that the democratic policies that we champion are actually wildly popular with the broad electorate. It's just getting that message to people. It's how we deliver it and how we meet people where they are.
Well, and it's also, and I'm gonna circle back around to this, but it's also who they think we are. And look,
Yeah.
I heard it. I've heard it. I actually been doing focus groups the last 2 weeks with a bunch of voters who didn't participate this time around. Um, and the conversation is Democrats aren't fighters. Democrats are weak,
Mm-hmm.
right? What? Why should we vote for Democrats if they're not going to fight? And Republicans are fighters.
Yeah.
Even if you don't believe in what they're doing, they fight for what they believe in. And there's a sense that Democrats don't fight for these things and don't fight for what they believe in, and are going to
I think
leave
we
them in
were
alert.
talking about that the first time we had a conversation. I mean, that's all, like every focus group, every time we talk to voters, they say we want Democrats to fight more. But, again, to your kind of consultant class and the advisors who are so risk adverse,
Yes,
they rein in their candidates and say, "Ooh, careful, you don't want to go out on a limb here."
that's right. And so after the election, where you had right and the major pullback and voting was around brown people, right, and younger people, which, as you know, sort of they're intertwined because younger America is more diverse. So if you're pulling back younger voters, you're pulling back diversity. Um, so the largest drop-offs from 2020 to 2024 were among younger and younger voters and voters of color. And so who say, that hear from Democrats and then they don't fight for us and they don't stand up for our issues and they won't champion our issues. And then after the election,
Hmm.
there's article after article and Democrat after Democrat on television talking about how they got to go in a different direction, right? So it becomes a reinforcing narrative that wait a minute, Democrats really don't fight for what they believe in, or what the hell do they even believe in? And if a different direction is not leaning into the issues that they supposedly believe in, and issues that are important to the base of their party, then it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yeah.
right? And that Democrats don't believe in anything and they won't fight. And this is where I get in trouble because frankly, I need to make more people uncomfortable. Because if you look at Steve, you laid it out, right? So we have approximately 6 million or so voters that we know voted for Democrat in 2020. Who, by the way, if half of them had voted this time around, Trump can't win. He can't.
Yeah.
So as opposed to early on Democrats going, what the hell's going on there? Let's lean, like they were with us, and we know from a policy and an issue standpoint, they are more aligned with us from everything from minimum wage to healthcare, and even culturally more aligned to us in that they don't see the changing face of American diversity as a threat to their way of life, right? So, and then
Right.
real, it's a cultural piece, right? They're more in line with us. So let's not go there. Let's instead try to figure out how we win voters who are voting for Donald Trump, who, by the way,
Right.
has never gotten a majority. Let's lean in on that. And to a certain extent, it goes, well, would you just rather have those voters than these voters? And it's a question that has to be asked, right? Are- it's would you rather have white voters than 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 the ascending brown voters who have supported you before? Because it's hard to have that conversation with these voters in qualitative settings when they hear what's been rolled out about how they got to move in a different direction and they got to champion different issues and they got to chase voters who have not been with them, right? So what do you tell that 27-year-old Latino, like or Hispanic male who voted for Biden and is not for Trump, although some of Trump's machoism is interesting, but
Yeah.
has not voted for Trump, and not crazy about the Republicans, but who doesn't really see a future in the Democratic Party. So what do you tell them when they see this?
Yeah. If I have an abundance of grace, which I'm not sure I do, but I try to, then I will uh, look at this great rift we have in our country, and also like what we were talking about at the very beginning, just like trying to reckon with, is this who we are as a country? And that in me has sort of a desire to reach out to Trump voters and really try to like, you know, get them out of the cult,
Yeah.
as you would a family member who has been, pulled into a cult, and but I cannot name one organizer on the planet, least of all in our country, who would suggest that they take a team of volunteers and go knock on doors of MAGA Republicans and spend their time trying to get them to vote for a Democrat. That is just not how we win. We win by reaching out to the people who align with our values, who we know have vote for us or have voted for Democrats in the past, and have those conversations with them. So I remember doing some deep canvassing back in 2017, up in Simi Valley, just north here of Los Angeles, which we kind of, it's a very Republican stronghold for those who don't know what Simi Valley is, and having some deep canvassing conversations with Republicans to try to find some common ground. And I mean, I think for like the sake of our country, those things are interesting to explore and important. I would like to
Yeah.
see us come together as a country more, for tactics in winning. Not so much. It's just not working. So anyway, I'm
But
digressing
I
a little
don't
bit,
want
but
to. I don't want the people listening to us to say that we thought that we
to
should
write them
not
off completely. Yeah.
talk to Trump voters or talk to people. Not at all. Should Democrats be doing better with working class white voters? Absolutely. Should we continue to try to have those conversations and pull them back, pull them in? Absolutely, we should, because can we win a point or two more of them back and forth? Perhaps we can.
Well, and we're seeing a lot of buyer's remorse right now,
Yes, but that is much higher hanging fruit
Right.
than these young voters who are with us on the environment, who are with us on a whole array of issues, uh, but are sitting this out, not because they're
Yeah.
Republican or they believe in Trump, because they don't believe in us,
Yeah.
right? I would argue that that's a better investment.
Well, let's talk about that. And you've been doing polling and focus groups. We have a lot of elections behind us, including last week's, where we saw 15-point shifts in Florida. We won Wisconsin, where we were massively outspent by 10 points. So, what are you seeing from your polling and focus groups heading into the midterm, taking into account last week? Is it even reasonable to try to apply like a 10-point swing to our congressional races based on last week's results?
Well, let me first set this up by level setting and saying we often read too much into special elections. That said,
I
let's go
really,
ahead.
really want to read too much into
Let's
it,
let's
though.
read too much into the special
Can't I
because
just
look,
do that this once?
yeah, well, because it also remind because you know we forget uh how disastrous Trump's first midterm was after he won, but there were signs happening along the way leading up to Trump's first midterm, disastrous midterm. Um, and they kind of look like these signs where you did see Democrats overperforming in elections, and but it also goes to the conversation again about not so much about huge swings, right? And there are some buyer's remorse there, and that you got to take into account, but also how ticked off the base of the party is, and how energized. Look, talking to voters who didn't participate in 2024 but participated in 2020, there's never going to be, no voter's going to say, "Oh my God, I wish I had voted. It's my fault," right? That's not how human nature operates. But I did see opportunity there to mobilize them around the threat that they see happening and the outrage that they see with everything from, especially, look, the cuts in threats to Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid,
Oh
right?
yeah,
I mean, that's real to these working class
yeah,
voters, and the cuts to the, like, I don't even understand. I didn't understand how big a symbol for everything that's going wrong with education, um, and how it's problematic for them if the Department of Education goes away. It's almost like value signaling for them, is that they don't there's like these people don't value public education if they're
right.
going to destroy the Department of Education, right? Now between you and I, Steve, it's like most people don't really understand what the Department of Education does, but they don't think it should go away.
That's
Right.
right.
So I
It
think this
had a rough start. Actually, a lot of teachers unions were not in favor of the Department of Education
that's
in the
right.
'70s when it started. Yeah,
That's right. But now they see it as again, it's value signaling. It's like, who's not for a Department of Education?
yeah,
Um, so I think there's opportunities there. But then on the flip side, there's back to this conversation about, I never hear from Democrats until they want my vote, and
right.
and they don't fight, and nothing ever changes. So I think there is a unique mobilization opportunity around the anger that's bubbling up around what's happening with Trump and his policies. But I think there's opportunity for a different kind of movement if we can also give them something to vote for. I think the magic of Obama was, and while he was able to build a movement and bring in so many young people, engage so many young people, um, and I think this is also true of the guy Dean who I work for also, is that you were giving them something to vote for, not just vote against, right?
Yeah,
And I hear in time and time again, right? I don't want to take the lesser of two evils. Now, which upsets me, because I think, well, so you think Trump's a racist, you get that, but yet you're still not going to come out and vote for the Democrats. To me, I would take the lesser of two evils. But I respect that so many of these younger voters are like, no, I'm not taking the lesser of two evils. They want something to vote for. And
hmm,
I think, I think Democrats have an opportunity here to build a real unique sort of movement of the ascending electorate, because of the anger and angst that they have with what Trump's doing. But that won't be realized until that brand is better positioned in their minds. That Democrats believe in something strongly, and they're going to fight for it, and they're going to stand by it, and they're going to stand by these communities, and they're not going to take these young voters for granted. I think if Democrats in the next several months are working at party building in that space around our brand,
hmm.
and it's not going to be overnight, right? It's got to be little by little by little. It's about showing up And I'm glad to see Democrats are doing more town halls. I think that's important, but we're still not going to reach a lot of these young voters in town halls.
Yeah.
But we got to show up and we got to give them something to vote for, not just against. And I think if we're doing that, I think we'll have a perfect storm going into the midterms because you can see from the special elections, you do have some anger, some angst, and some energy
Yeah.
out there on the left. And let's not forget about the moderate middle of the electorate, which is so important. The moderate middle of the electorate who didn't buy into any of this gutting of the federal government and firing
Right.
people and
Right.
all these and doing away with the Department of Education on coming after Social Security. Right? They didn't buy in on any of that. So I think it's a perfect storm opportunity, but we've got to be more proactive about defining and party building.
Love that. That's hopeful. That leads into my last question for you. I know you got to go, but in this tenuous time when we're taking a lot of hits and watching some really terrifying stuff unfold, what's giving you hope right now?
The the people mobilizing, um, and like this past weekend, right? There
Yeah,
was
Saturday was
yeah,
spectacular.
and I was down in the coastal Virginia.
Hmm.
We had done some groups Thursday, and I stayed over and I stayed over in Norfolk, and just seeing right outside of Washington, right? Just seeing everyday regular people mobilizing and engaging um, outside across the country. That gives me hope because it gives me hopes to say, well, again, I'll start I'll end where we started is who are we, America? What
Hmm.
what do we want to be? And I think a lot of people are going, well, that's not us. We don't want to be that. And I think they're beginning to mobilize around that.
I love that. I think so too. And we got to keep it up. We can't make this just a one-off.
Yeah.
Cornell, it's great to have you. Thanks for joining again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, Jess. We did have someone call in to give us their reason for hope,
Oh,
and
good.
I'm so glad they did. As a reminder for folks, we do have a call-in line where you can leave a message, tell us what you're up to, what you're working on, or just give us your reason for hope. That number is 818-824-4286. You can also text us at that number and leave your message that way. But let's take a listen.
Let's hear it.
Hi, this is Jill calling from DuPage County, Illinois. I'm calling with a little bit of reason for hope. So really the win in Wisconsin on April 1st was great, but on a local level, for me anyway, and I think all of my neighbors, things went really well too. This is an update from the DuPage Democrats who say that they recruited volunteers to mail 80,000 get out the vote postcards, 400,000 text messages, and generated 75,000 digital impressions. And as a result of that, we won. We just won and won and won. 38 races were outright flips. 20 were against GOP incumbents. So at the township and local level, we went from red to blue like a tidal wave. And
Yeah.
it's just really exciting. That's it. Reason
That
for
is
hope.
so great, Jill. Thank you for calling. And actually, I'm so glad she brought that up because we did have a lot of electoral wins in Illinois last week, and like nobody's really talking about it just because I don't know, Wisconsin was the big shiny toy. But yeah. We, especially in the Chicago suburbs, but everywhere in Illinois, there was just a rout by Democrats. Really fantastic news. That was great.
Yeah, and we're hearing that all over the country. There was a team of city council members in Rolla, Missouri, who have been pushing anti-LGBTQ policies, including a ban on drag shows and book censorships. voters just ousted all 3 of those city councilors who
Yep.
were running for re-election and backed candidates, who were backed by a local LGBT group. So, we're seeing that happen all over the country, and let's keep that up, shall we?
Yeah. And it's a really friendly reminder to really pay attention to these down ballot races. They are so unbelievably important. They are deciding what books our kids can and cannot read, climate action, public transportation, housing policy, all getting decided by city council, school boards, board of supervisors. So very much important to pay attention and do what the, Illinois Democrats just did. Flip those seats. It's fantastic. It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Jill.
you, Jill. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us and listening today. Don't forget that all the links for our actions that we talked about are in our show notes. So don't just listen, click those links. Take action. Please subscribe, rate, and review our show on Apple, YouTube, or wherever you may find it. And share our show with your friends and family members. Make sure they are taking action to help us win as well. If you're able to support our show on Substack, we would be very grateful. That would be helpful until Marine Layer starts kicking in. And then you'll also get an ad-free version of the show as well. We will be back next week with some more Practivist Pods. So until then, don't forget, hope is in action.
Bye.